So what would be a brief statement? What's the situation in this story?
I don't know, I think Jesus' compassion, even though he knew this guy was not gonna do everything he told him to do.
Okay.
Then he said, I'm willing.
The compassion of Jesus in his heart.
Jesus willingly performs a miracle and the ramifications of everybody finding out.
Wow.
Probably what I titled.
Ministry has no rest.
Ministry, there's no rest for
Ain't
ministry.
no rest for the minister.
No rest in the minister. I think there's some.
Yeah, okay, that's great. So I want us to sit and think for a minute before we start to go through the story. What would it have, might it have felt like to be that leper?
Painful,
Okay.
physically.
Well,
Okay,
actually,
physically painful?
no pain.
Opposite of painful.
Because leprosy takes away your pain. So
No
you
pain?
hit yourself
You
until
won't
the point
see
that
it.
you don't realize that's why you don't have limbs anymore and
So,
there's rottenness and it's happening,
so
so.
basically for him, that saying, no pain, no gain, truly a legitimate thing. He had no
Exactly.
pain, but he gained a lot of things.
I think also that they're so ostracized and they're not touching anybody, like they can't be around people at all.
What might, emotions might they be feeling if they can't be around others and be touched? What would that be like?
Loneliness to no end.
Depression,
Yeah.
hopeless.
Hopeless, yeah.
Valueless, hopeless, depression, lonely. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the beginning of this story, we see this leper kneel before Jesus and beg him, if you're willing, you could make me clean. And we see Jesus reach out his hand and touch him and say, I am willing. Be clean. So let's think a minute. What can we learn about this leper that he approaches Jesus and kneels before him?
His faith.
He has faith? In what way?
He knew that God could heal him.
Mm-hmm.
Desperate.
He's desperate,
And courageous.
courageous.
To go before someone known as a rabbi, as a leper. Not supposed to do that.
Mm. Wow. So he's doing something he shouldn't do. He begs him and says, if you are willing. Did he have a choice there? I'm sorry, he the leper.
Have
Is there anything else he might have done?
snuck up behind Jesus and grabbed the edge of his garment.
That's what I was just
Oh,
thinking.
Very content.
Okay, she didn't have the boldness to kneel in front
We could have done that.
Okay.
Could have yelled from afar, hey, Jesus!
You could have just.
Kind of like Zacchaeus,
Yeah.
or not the blind man in Jericho.
Let's see in this story then when he begs Jesus, the leopard begs Jesus and says, if you are willing, you could make me clean. Jesus has compassion and he reaches out his hand and touches. What impact did that have on Jesus when he touched the leper?
Well, he would have been considered unclean.
Okay, yeah, if you remember from the introduction,
Yeah.
Jesus then would have been considered unclean. So what do we learn about Jesus that he was willing to touch him?
He cared more about that man than he did the law. That the law that he would be unclean. The
Okay.
cultural
Okay.
implications that would come of that.
so what was the result on Jesus then? Do you remember from the introduction? Once he had touched him,
He'd be unclean, considered outcast.
he'd be unclean
He'd be clean
Till
till midnight or
and,
evening.
yeah,
Till dusk.
until dusk, yeah, so for the rest of the day he was considered unclean. And yet he was willing. And, I'm just wondering, when he said, I am willing be clean, and the man was healed. How do you think, what was the impact on that leper?
Where do you start?
It's crazy.
It'd be a huge contrast from what he was feeling before. Hope, joy, I mean, he might have been outcast for a long time,
Mhm.
and so finally he could go and be with his friends and be with people, be with people.
Hug his mom.
The next thing Jesus does is he gives the man a stern warning to not go and spread the news, but to go to the priest, to be examined, to offer the sacrifices, to be a testimony to them. So what do we learn about Jesus? That he gives them these instructions in a stern warning, not just a suggestion, but a stern warning.
Jesus isn't trying to make himself known through the leper. He's not trying to just spread that word. Yeah, he's not trying to make himself known
Okay.
in a massive way
Mhm.
at this point.
Mhm.
That's interesting, cause he wants it to be a witness to the, not the people out there, but to the priests, the religious leaders, who were the ones who had the hardest time with him.
Mm.
And so it would be a kind of a showing something's happening and there are healings, so let's take note of what's going on. You just have to wonder what was, if that was a missed opportunity for them.
If what was a missed
It was a
opportunity?
missed opportunity to have the witness of this particular miracle.
Ah, okay. And what do you think the result was of that missed opportunity?
They hardened their hearts. I'm just thinking
The,
about it.
the priests?
Priests.
It might have hardened
Mhm.
their hearts. Does any of you have any other ideas? What might have been the result that, on Jesus, that the man didn't go to them to be the testimony?
If he had gone to them, then it would have followed the law, right?
Mm-hmm.
So him not going to them was almost, like, do you think it would have looked like they were against the law in its blank sense?
Disrespecting
Like this, yeah, not,
the law of Moses.
Oh,
like,
so Josh, you said disrespecting the law of Moses? Might have looked like they were disrespecting the law.
Could have been just disrespecting the priests
mhm.
Right,
by not going.
right.
Wow.
Well, I think too, because along that, because that, back in the law, it says whatever you do with it, and then you go and you show yourself to the priest, and then he declares you clean, right?
Mhm.
And so because he didn't go directly to that, the priest obviously just created more dissension and more chaos, but also he may have still been considered unclean by a lot of people who were in authority because they didn't go through the proper, even though, I don't know, I mean, he looked clean, obviously, he shows that he has no leprosy, but they'll come up with anything to try to get people into trouble, right, so, I don't know.
Oh, so you're saying an impact on the man that had the leprosy is that since he didn't go through the, could you repeat
Proper,
what you
like,
said?
okay, so the impact could have been, He may have been still considered unclean, like, for him personally, he knew he was clean, but he may have been considered unclean still
By others.
by others. I don't know if that makes sense, maybe it's not true, I don't know.
Because he didn't follow the law.
He didn't follow the law.
Declare him clean.
Because the priest didn't declare him
Wow,
clean.
so what impact might that have had on him? The leper,
Still unclean?
still considered unclean?
I don't know.
Wow.
Spreading his uncleanness to everybody that he talks to, he touches.
Wow.
And I think it would reflect, it would, to the people who already really dislike Jesus, to the priests, people who are already bitter towards Jesus and his ministry and what he's doing, the fact that Jesus would heal this leper and the leper would go and start telling everybody what Jesus did, and bringing all this attention and all this fame to Jesus, would continue to harden the hearts of the priests. Instead of if the leper had obeyed and gone to the priests, I'm here to make a sacrifice, to be declared clean, Jesus sent me, because he healed me. I know what a testimony that would have been to them, a reflection that Jesus still wanted him to follow the law and still respect that. But instead, very opposite happened, because I'm sure they think that Jesus sent the leper out to go tell everyone and not to come and make a sacrifice.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah, so we see then, since the leper does go out, or the man who used to have the leprosy goes out and tells the news all over the place until Jesus has trouble entering any villages and has to go out into the lonely places, and people come to him there from everywhere. So in this part of the story, what has been the impact of that leper's choice to skip that step and not go to the priest, but to tell? What has been the impact?
He's made things harder for Jesus.
Okay, in what way has he made it harder for Jesus?
He can't get around in the cities or the towns. Yes,
I was thinking about all the people who maybe like can't actually move very far. So now Jesus is not in the towns where they can access him. Only the people who can walk are out in the lonely places with him. So that, I mean, unless they have some really committed friends like there have been, you know, take him out there, but that would be hard.
Wow, so his act of unwillingness to follow what Jesus said sounds like that impacted a lot of people. What impact do you think it had on Jesus? After Jesus had healed him and then he didn't do what he asked him.
Restricted his movement.
Oh, it restricted his movement, huh?
Probably disappointed Jesus is my guess. You know, I did heal you and I was faithful to you, but you're not faithful in honoring me as well.
So what do we learn about Jesus' heart from this story?
He's willing to make us, I don't know, to equip us or heal us, if he's willing to move in our lives.